Welcome to the Assembling Inclusion podcast. On this show, we feature different programs, individuals, and initiatives focused on being more inclusive of individual needs. We invite you to learn right alongside us. If you want some additional resources or access to our courses, please visit our website or follow us on social media. But for right now, let's get right to the episode. Hello and welcome back to the Assembly Inclusion podcast. Today we are joined by Emily Thomas, Technology Integration Analyst and Trainer for Northeast Metro Intermediate School District 916. We're going to be talking about all things inclusive Makerspace today. So Emily, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to talk about this. This is one of my favorite things.
I'm so excited to have you on the show because a little while ago, I think it was during like an ISTE community leader meeting, you did a recap of your inclusive makerspace work. And then I know you also presented on it at ISTE this past year.
Yeah.
And so I was finally like, we need to sit down and talk finally after all this time.
Yes, we do. Yes. Yeah, it's a super fun thing I get to do. And I'm excited that school's starting back up and we get to do more creative learning. So I'm super excited.
So let's start at the beginning, right? Let's talk about what started you on this journey to push for more inclusive makerspaces within your district.
So the inclusive part was just where I knew where we had to start because the majority of my students are significant and profound special education needs. So they just have a lot of unique needs. And since I started there 8 years ago, I kind of built this education technology library that just has these like low frequency, high engagement tools. So we have lots of robots, VR, AR, like all of the fun stuff, but you're not using it every single day in a classroom because it's a lot. And then COVID happened to all of us. And I was like, wow, I have a lot of really fun stuff. And it is just sitting in boxes behind my desk. What do we do with it now? So talking to some people, brainstorming, we're like, what if we made this more of a makerspace? Because we realized that our challenge was with the library model, it was like one more thing that we're putting on our teachers. So having we're going to make this more of a makerspace model where we're going to use some of these same things, but we're going to kind of provide a challenge, provide some guides, provide some particular instructions for teachers and students so that it's less of I have this cool thing and I'm super excited about it. Now what? To I have this bin. It has all of the materials. I have the lessons. I have someone who's willing to come and co-teach. And that was sort of our pivot point. And now it is like constantly in use. And it's so much fun to watch the students just engage and learn in a different way.
I'm so glad you mentioned the kit piece and having everything put together for the teachers, then having somebody to co-teach with you, because I think that's always been like the biggest pushback I get from people when I talk about any kind of inclusion initiative. It's always like, I don't have the time to figure this out. So I love that you have everything kind of just laid out nicely for the teachers to just grab and start using with their students immediately.
When I was in the classroom, it was always like every new initiative was like one more thing on your plate. And you already had an overflowing plate. Every day was a Thanksgiving plate, right? So adding one more thing wasn't always possible. So that was sort of like, everyone agrees that the learning is important. How do we make this easy to use for educators and still powerful learning for students?
And so like leading into that, I want to talk about how you provide different levels of differentiation within your makerspace.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
How did you really decide on what levels you wanted to include? How did you really make sure that those levels were accommodating and supportive of all the different learners who would be in the classroom?
Yeah. So it is impossible to differentiate in advance for every single student, right? We all know that. You can't. I worked with some of my educator friends, some of our autism resource specialists, some of our physical and health disabilities teachers, this really great team of experts. And we kind of just like, okay, let's pick a reasonable number of differentiations that we can make. We landed on 6 was kind of our reasonable number, and fitting in the like big buckets of what the students need. So we started with the, okay, everything is going to have what we call them single instruction slide, where every step that we're doing is 1 or 2 sentences, really simple, straightforward language, and an image or two, depending on if it's like, we're going to cut. We'll sometimes have a picture of scissors and then like the picture of what we're cutting, but have an image or two that says, okay, this is what we're doing for this step. And then the next slide is the next step. That fits a lot of students' needs. And if we need to break it down, we have a couple of additional differentiations that go along with that I'll go into in a second. But then we have a side by side. So it has the instruction and the image, but they're all listed together. So it's not a single slide, it's just a list. And then we eliminate the images. So it's just a list of instructions. Still really those detailed instructions, but just a list of instructions, a finished product image where some students just want to see what we're going for. And then they're like, oh, I can now be creative and head in that direction. Some students really appreciate a video. So I source a lot of my stuff from what other people have made on YouTube. Again, this is one of those like silver linings of COVID is a lot of libraries and other sort of family organizations have put together these video instructions for people to do these activities at home. And I'm like, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. Great. I've made a couple of my own videos, but mostly I just find other people. So I'm like, cool, thank you. And then for our sort of more general ed students, we do have some gen ed students that do these as well. We do a challenge card is what I call it, where it's just, and this is sort of the more typical Makerspace challenge of, okay, here are your materials, you need to make whatever. So giving them the least amount of supports. And of course, as I'm teaching this or as the teachers are teaching this, all of these resources are in a Google folder. It gets emailed to them. I create them all, so I have them in my Google Drive. And if we need to switch, we just open up the other file and we just adjust as needed. There's one school that has a particular like formatted layout that they use for everything. So when I'm doing the activity with them, I paste my stuff into their format that has their sort of introduction that the students know. And so we just, yep, that's what we're doing in this one. So really trying to meet as many needs as possible, knowing that we're not going to meet all of them. But in addition, so one other thing we do is for the step-by-step slide instructions, I also print them out and laminate them so that if a student needs something physical or the technology is distracting or we have a visual impairment, they can see those. And then we use a Braille taper. It looks like it's like a labeler, but it just will punch the Braille with like a little, like a label maker, essentially. I don't even know how to describe this. It has the English characters on the top. You spin it around and then punch it and then put the tape down. I did have to learn which way was up and down on Braille, so I know a little bit of Braille now so that I can put it the correct way on there. But just making it, okay, that now it supports our visually impaired students. So we can really get as many needs as possible without adding, no, I can't differentiate for all 2,000 students. That's not possible. You have to kind of pick these buckets and make it a little more generalized. And then when you're actually teaching it, adjust.
I love that you took these kind of overarching ideas to make it a little bit easier. So I think that is the most overwhelming part is people think they have to have, one specific thing for each individual student, but you can have these overarching ideas that could support a lot of students. Like I know you have even just the example of the finished model. I could think about a handful of my students who that would have been all they needed. Like they would have been so content with just having like, oh, this is what it's supposed to kind of look like. Great, I could take off running now. But then other students would have loved that step by step with the picture. So it's great that you kind of picked a couple of things that really could support a lot of different students in the classroom.
Yeah, and that really makes it more manageable, for me to create, because if I'm trying to put together, my goal is to do 4 different kits each school year, which is how we get as many of them, but that also keeps it fresh for teachers, fresh for students, and keeps them engaged in this creative problem solving process throughout the year. And knowing that we get to do these fun, engaging lessons, and we always joke that they just think they're having fun and like playing. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I just hid all of these skills as peas in this really fun mac and cheese here because there's a lot of veggies in this dish, but you don't even taste them because it's too much fun.
They're distracted by how enjoyable it is
Yeah,
but they're
and
not
and
realizing
and
they're
a little bit of
learning.
cheese because you gotta have a little bit of cheese.
Oh, yeah. It's gonna be a little bit in there at least. So that leads into a good question. Like, the makerspace idea, right, is so often this open-ended, creative problem-solving process. So how do you manage to balance, like, the freedom that typically comes with a makerspace with the structure that usually goes along with differentiation when you're planning for these kits?
Yeah, so I kind of find ideas all over the place. I honestly find a lot of really cool ideas on Instagram Reels because I'm an old person and I don't have TikTok.
Me either. I feel you. It's okay.
Yep. It's fine. It's all good. And I just see these really cool projects that other people are doing, or I see kind of a fun thing out in the world. Just, oh, that's a cool thing that somebody has made. And then I think, okay, what's our question? What's our challenge that we could present to students? And then from there, I always start kind of with this more typical, okay, what's our challenge? What's our problem? And kind of approaching it that way. But then knowing that I'm going to have to provide supports and structure. So I actually end up building the things with it and I end up creating it. And a lot of our single slide instructions are of my desk, of my dining room table, and the pieces laid out because that's where I'm building and testing and making that instruction for students.
And I think it's so hard to balance the 2, but it seems like your kids have done a really nice job of that, of making sure that, the students have the support they need, they're engaged, but they're still creative and problem solving all at the same time.
I don't ever want it to be super prescriptive. There's always needs to be some element of choice, even if it's just we're going to choose a color. We're going to choose the color that we're going to draw with. We're going to choose our color bottle cap, our color rubber bands, because sometimes our choice is limited, especially for some of our students who have more physical disabilities or limited mobility skills. They're going to have a really hard time, you know, designing their own cotton ball launcher. So we're going to go with our step by steps and we're going to use our paraprofessionals and education assistants and everybody in the classroom to help with this ultra fine motor skill of twisting rubber bands, which is one of those things that we don't think about as being a really tough skill, but it is. And then we're making these cotton ball launchers, which is super fun project. Highly recommend that one to everyone. And figuring out that, oh, you know what we can do? I don't want to just do it for the students because I don't ever want to just, I don't like doing it for them.
Yeah, exactly.
I want them to do at least part of it, but they were really struggling with the twisting the rubber bands. So I was kind of coaching the other adults in the room. Okay, we're going to actually put it around, but the students will twist the rubber band for us because you have to kind of do that twist in between. And I didn't even think about that until I was with students. And I was like, oh, I didn't, of course. Yeah, that was just a skill that I just have and muscle memory did it. I was like, oh, okay. And then we all kind of did it together. And then, later in the day when we were doing it a second time with the same teachers, different group of students, they were like, oh yeah, this is a super good way. And now they have kind of incorporated that when they're doing a rubber banding of other things where the staff actually, you know, put it around, but the students will do the twist in the middle because they're able to do that skill.
And it's a good way to practice those fine motor skills too, because I think that's something I always forget about when I'm planning out like activities. That can be so challenging. So it's great that this is also, part of it is done for them, but then they could practice a little bit too, to give them that sense of ownership
Absolutely.
still.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, and if some students are able to do the rubber band and that's wonderful, do it. Great, do that.
Yeah, it's not like everybody has to do the exact same thing the exact same way. So it really lends itself to figure out what works for you best as a learner.
Yeah, yeah. So this kind of gets into another part of differentiating is a kind of modifying the way we're approaching the project. So the cotton ball launchers is one of my favorite examples of this because I have three different ways that we approach the lesson. It started out because I was talking to some friends and we were talking about like the t-shirt cannons at sporting events. and this ridiculous fact that they can shoot like 100 feet in the air. And like, that's just wild to me when I think about how far that is. And I was like, man, that's actually would be a really cool thing to like talk about and engage students in, because of course some of our older students are super into sports. They're interested in basketball or football or whatever. All of them have the t-shirt cannon situation. But I was like, man, that's super cool. So kind of talking about that and like the physics of it for some of our older students. But I was like, man, how do we connect this to our younger students? And I was like, oh, it's Angry Birds, which they love Angry Birds. So we're not shooting cotton balls, we're shooting birds at the little pigs. And they loved it. And then I don't remember who it was. I wish I could remember who it was now. In the ISTE community leader meeting, suggested, hey, for our even younger learners, what about Pete the Cat? And I was like, of course, Pete the Cat has the song about his groovy buttons. So we just changed it to be fluffy buttons because we're launching cotton balls. And that then differentiated for all of our students. So some of our emergent readers, our preschool age students, we did the fluffy buttons. Then for more of our kind of middle school, late elementary school students, we did the Angry Birds. And then our older learners, we talked about the t-shirt cannons. And the older students then were like, wait, could we scale this up? And I was like, yeah, how could we make it bigger? Like, this is just to launch, a cotton ball. How could we design a different t-shirt cannon? Which they wanted PVC pipe. And I was like, okay, well, you got to talk to your principal about that. I'm not sourcing you PVC pipe and industrial strength rubber. I'm out. I'm going to draw a line, talk to your principal.
They were just so into it. That's so cute. I like that there was an opportunity for you'd incorporate students' interests too, based on their levels, based on just things that they enjoyed. I could totally have seen my middle school students wanting to build a giant t-shirt cannon. That would have totally been right up their alley with my sixth
Yeah. And
graders.
it's really one of those, like, I try to incorporate some practical learning as well in them. So the kind of in the introduction little video, we actually did have we talked about the physics of a t-shirt cannon for that one. Whereas the Pete the Cat, we just watched the Pete the Cat song and we sang the song while we launched our buttons around the room. It was a little, they looked very different, but we were all approaching the same skill of how do we build something that can launch this cotton ball the furthest way around the room.
It's still the same problem solving, but tailored to what interests them, which falls under the
Exactly.
differentiation mindset,
Exactly
obviously. So
right.
that works.
Yep, totally.
So you've made so many kits. I know you've talked about wanting to make 4 or 5 a year, and I think at your ISTE presentation, you shared like 26 different ones, which
Yep,
is
I have
so
26
cool.
currently, and I'm hoping to have 4 more this school year. So we'll be at 30 by next ISTE. Fingers crossed.
That is amazing. And I know you said you like to look at, like Instagram reels and things like that for inspiration, but is there a specific process that you have for like definitively deciding like this is a new kit that I'm going to make? Is there any kind of like, well, some groups of students are interested in this, let me make a kit for it, or is it more, organic?
It is all of the above. I always try to include one art-based kit a year
Mhm.
because we have a district art show in the spring every year, and I want every student to have an opportunity to create a piece of art for that show. So last year we did Lego block printing. So we used Lego or
Oh.
Duplo, and then you of course could do it with acrylic paint, but I was like, we're going to make this a little bit more real feeling. So I actually got some inexpensive artists ink, and then they were
Ooh.
able to use the roller and roll it on and kind of mimic the authentic like art class experience, but you know creating these prints, and they created absolutely stunning prints. Some of the students, our older students, used Lego dots. So they're really small pieces, but it created a flat surface. So then they could actually create a design. And and then some of our students just used Duplo animals and stamped the feet and made, I mean, honestly, one of my favorite pieces was made with an elephant and a rocking horse, and it looks like hyacinth flowers on like
Ooh.
across a field. It is stunning. And I was like, yep, that's elephant feet and a rocking horse, but you created beautiful flowers and I love it.
That is amazing. So it's just a common other than, like, having the set art piece, you're just doing whatever comes naturally over the course of
Yeah.
the year.
This is my summer projects. I do usually do 2 or 3 projects over the summer for our extended school year program
Mhm.
because it is a little bit more fun, just supposed to be an engaging time.
Yeah.
So 2 of the instructional coaches came to me and said, hey, we're doing a Minnesota themed summer. Can we come up with 3 different projects that are Minnesota themed? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So one of them was they were doing state fair carnival week. So we had them build their own mini golf course or roller coaster. And then we used Sphero robots to go around the golf course. Super
Aw,
fun, kind of fit into the
yeah.
theme. One of them was nature and outdoors. So we had them make paper versions of our state bird, a loon. So that was kind of a fun learning about loons. So we're just going to learn about the animal. And then we made a paper loon and they flew them around the room. And then, of course, some of my older middle school aged students were not into the decorating the loon piece. They're like, I don't care what it looks like. I was like, cool. Then figure out what combination of paper clips makes it fly the furthest. I had one student who was like, I don't want to cut mine out. I just want to draw a really pretty bird. And I was like, rock on, make me the prettiest loon ever. And it was gorgeous. I mean, it was hot pink and yellow and purple, but it was beautiful. Rock on.
Yeah, yeah, figure out what works best for you. That sounds like a pretty bird, so I'd
Right?
be
I was
open to
like, hey,
that.
it's a real tropical loon.
There we go. See, it all fits.
Yeah. And then our other one was they wanted to do something with quilts. And they were really into the idea of creating a site quilt. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Okay. So we actually learned about the history of African American quilts and how they were used to communicate messages with the Underground Railroad. So totally kind of outside of the STEAM ballpark, but we're still doing it to kind of create this more artistic project of creating a quilt square. And the students absolutely loved that one and they had so much fun. We had them do a found object quilt. So they went outside and found fun, weird things on the playground and in the school forest and then glued them on. And to my surprise, the students that found rocks managed to stick them onto a piece of cardstock with glue stick. And I was like, oh, that's going to fall right off. But hey, somehow they worked their magic and got rocks to stick to cardstock with glue stick.
That's very impressive. I would not expect that. I don't think I could
Ooh,
glue a rock to a piece of paper and
nope.
have it stick, to be honest with
I
you.
barely got the yarn that I barely got some yarn and like tissue paper to stick. So I don't know what magic they were having, but I'm impressed.
Students have all the power. It's
They
all good.
do.
They
They
were they were
always
driven enough
do.
to do it. But I love that it's so nice that there's such a variety in all the different projects that you're doing, and it really shows that, like, you can incorporate it into things that you're already themes you're already teaching and things like that, but still allowing for the choice, for students to feel supported, for allowing them to make, their own decisions. There's so many factors, the history piece that comes into some of the things.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
nice to see how everything intertwines to make, a project work.
Yeah, my whole goal is to not make it feel separate from what we're doing in school, but fit in different ways.
Yeah.
So we kind of go a little bit outside of STEAM, but that is the bulk of it is in that kind of in that STEAM space. But we connect it to English language art. We do a lot of stuff with like letters. There's a lot of my activities are based around, letters or this history project. There's one that fits in with geography and is building landmarks from around the world out of Lego pieces, which is just fun. So,
Yeah. It's enjoyable, but it fits into, like, the subject area standards then too.
yep,
So for our teachers who are I know I taught in the resource room for English, and we were so pressed for time all the time, but, like, that's a perfect way to bring in that type of work, but still, fit, quote, unquote, "the standards you're covering in class," because everything is kind of
exactly.
interwoven together, and it's,
Yeah.
I love an opportunity for cross collaboration and things
Oh,
like
yeah.
that, so that's perfect.
I'm all about that and finding interesting ways to fit in all of these different topics and really make it a much more vibrant learning experience, and not like, okay, this is our math class and we're going to talk about math. And then I'm going to leave this room and I'm never going to think about math again. And I'm going to go talk about English.
Yeah,
It's like, no,
exactly.
we can connect these beyond like word problems.
Yeah, the door to the classroom doesn't have to separate the experience. So I
Exactly.
love that through the
We
makerspace.
can do lots of really cool creative projects to demonstrate our learning. Yeah, totally.
So from a logistical standpoint, right? How do you manage all the different makerspaces? Because that's a lot. And I know you have a lot of students within the district. So how do you like keep track of I'm like the most disorganized person
I
ever when it comes to that. So how do you do
Sure.
that?
So firstly, I love organizing things. That's one of my like, that's how I thrive, is by making sure things are organized. So that just plays into it a little bit. Like that just helps me. I start with a management system. That's sort of where I start my process. So everything is done super simply through a Google form. When somebody is borrowing a kit, and I don't have my teachers fill this out, I am the only one that has access to this Google form. And our department's admin assistant also has access to it, because if I'm with a different site and she's going to send something around with our interdistrict courier, she can fill it out for me as well. But
Mhm.
I just fill it out with the teacher's name. I have just a drop down menu that has every kit in it. So you just select it and then that's it. Like really, really simple. So then I have a spreadsheet that just has everything that's checked out. And then I added a column that just says it's been returned. So I use the little checkbox feature in my sheet, check the box, and I keep it really simple. So that's kind of how I organize what's in stock. The other side of it is I created a Google slideshow that just has like a brief 1 or 2 sentence description and pictures of every single project, and that's shared publicly with our teachers. Whenever they ask me, hey, what's available, I send them that so they can look through, and sort of that's our catalog, for lack of a better word. But it's a slideshow. And when I create a new kit, I put it in the slideshow, so it rolls from year to year. And that's how I let them know. This is also where some of our library stuff is just, you can just check out robots too. They're part of the kit, but you can still check them out and use them for something different if you have another idea. So all of that is in there as well. So
I That's very streamlined. That's a lot easier to manage than I thought it was going to be.
yeah, because anything more than that, like I've tried some of these, like I tried one year to have teachers fill it out and request it from me, and I'd get an email. And I found that 0% of my teachers filled out the form, 100% of them emailed me. And then when I asked them to fill out the form, I got the email from the form, and then they emailed me again saying, okay, can you send it to me now? And I was like, okay, this is silly. Just really simply, like, just take that path of least resistance. Like if they're going to email you, just don't try to add an additional process to that step. Just, okay, to email me, and then I will take care of this back end management stuff, because it takes me 12 seconds to fill out this form.
Yeah, and that really falls too under the, accommodating all different types of learners, knowing how your teachers respond best and streamlining that process to make it easier for them, for you, for everybody involved.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have this really great system. They can fill it all out. And I was like, they're not gonna fill it out. They're never gonna look at this form. Forget the bookmark. They're going to forget that they've bookmarked it 7 times, and I'm
Yes.
going to still email them the form every single time. Okay. Just I will create a bookmark in my Chrome, and I will just eliminate all of those other steps for myself.
Just make it easier. That's
Yeah,
you know
make
what?
it
It works
easy.
out.
Yep.
More likely to use it if it's easier anyway to figure out.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, what types of feedback have you gotten so far from I know you've been doing it for a couple of years now, but from students, from teachers, what has been their response to the different inclusive makerspace kits and experiences that you've built?
Yeah, so the teachers really love them, and they love that it always comes with an offer for me to co-teach it with them. My only, restriction is, hey, there's 14 buildings and I am one person. I can't be in 2 places at once, let alone 14. So
Mhm.
you probably can't ask for tomorrow, but if you want something next week or the week after, we can probably find a time that works for both of us. And I would be happy to come into your classroom and co-teach it with you. Our principals absolutely love it. And one of my schools has already booked my calendar for one Friday a month, and I will just be there doing a rotation through all of their classrooms. So it's just, we'll do a different project every month, and the teachers will just know when, pick their time and come over to, they have a kind of a lab that I can use. So I get to just be in one space, which makes it a little easier than bouncing around from classroom to classroom to classroom all day.
That's true. That's really nice, and it's great that there's, like, administrator buy-in too, that they're saying, "We're going to make sure this is happening once a month for our students." So they clearly see the value in it as well then.
Yeah. Yep. They totally do. And I think I'll come back to student feedback in a second, but one of the ways that I've really kind of helped get the administrator buy-in is by actually having them do some of the activities at their retreats, at their manager meetings, and just doing some of the minis, some of the small ones where it's only a 5 or 8 minute project. We're not spending, 45 minutes on this big project. We're just doing something, a bite. So
Mhm.
they get to experience this creative problem solving and kind of having that fun experience too. And giving them that opportunity really helps with the buy-in. I've even taken them to our school board and had the school board do activities. They are the most stubborn, but they end up having the most fun, I think. But a bunch of adults in a room with, you hand them some, okay, here's some sticky notes and Q-tips. You have to make a glider. And they sort of just look at you like, what? You want me to do what now? And I'm like, yeah, here you go. Have fun. You have 7 minutes. And they're like, what? Only 7 minutes? And I'm like, yeah, let's go.
I love
So,
that they have to do it too. That's so
of
perfect.
course. And I set the exact same expectations from my preschoolers to the school board. It is the exact same expectations. And I won't tell you who's follows the expectations the least. You can probably guess. It's not the preschoolers.
I was gonna say just as myself as an adult learner, I know I would probably have a harder time following the rules than my students would have. They
And I
would do
set
way
the
better than
rules,
me.
the expectations are super simple. It is the same five always. It is, we're going to be safe, respectful. I'm going to share. We're going to ask for help and fail forward. So it's always the same. And with some of my younger learners or the students who need a little bit more support, we'll go through and talk about what that means for the school board, for the adults, the teachers, the admins. I just let them read it. you know, Again, we're differentiating for everybody.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that works. No, I
Um,
love that.
yeah. And then my students love it. They think it's so much fun. They are like, now when they see me in the building, they're like, oh, are we doing something fun today? And I'm
Oh.
like, yeah, we are. What do you think we're going to do today? So they kind of know I have this we found this just cart that holds our 20-gallon bins really well. So just I don't have to carry bins around because bins of Lego get really heavy really fast.
Yes.
So I have this little orange cart. So they see my orange cart and they're like, oh, it's the fun cart.
Oh.
And I'm like, I need to like make a sign that's like cart of fun or something for my
Yes, give it a name.
give it a name.
I
Oh,
love that. It
yeah.
really
So
shows how
they
much they love it, though.
Yeah, they do. And they, each site has their own like favorite project that they've done. So that kind of varies, but yeah, everybody loves it. And it just makes me happy that I can, bring some fun and creative problem solving to them and, you know, a little bit of something different. And it's great.
And it's great that they have, like, the opportunity to do it because I always think about and I always go back to when I was in the classroom that I feel like my students always missed out on the fun stuff. They, like, missed out on occasionally they'd miss, like, their STEM elective or their music elective because they were in a supplemental class to improve reading and math, and they missed those opportunities, which is terrible and, like, a whole 'nother conversation. But it's great that everybody kind of has that opportunity here. Like, everybody they're bringing it into the classroom for them, so they're not missing the chance for that type of experience.
Yeah, that is sort of the other piece of this, and what I've been trying to do when I talk on podcasts or kind of out at conferences is this like, hey, our special education students are maybe the ones that need this the most. They're going to benefit from this the most because they are going to use those super creative problem solving skills. And embedded in that is all of those life skills that we're trying to practice with them. I mean, doing a makerspace activity is a masterclass in resilience.
Mhm.
And that's, I mean, like every IEP has building resilience on it, I feel like, or most of them. So that's such an important skill to practice. And honestly, I have adult friends who could practice some resilience skills. There's so many, I mean, we could list them all, but I think everybody's now thinking of all of these like hidden skills. It's back to the peas and the mac and cheese, right? We're hiding all of these skills. So when you highlight that, they're like, oh, yeah, okay. And especially then when we can tie it to different parts of the curriculum and internationally across grade levels. And yeah, we can talk about, I'm going back to the cotton ball launchers. Yeah, we could talk about the physics of a t-shirt cannon, or we can just talk about, what kind of angles or slopes tying in geometry for the Angry Birds part, or you can always tie these into these fun activities, or just our literacy, our counting with Pete the cat.
There's always a way to incorporate multiple things into it. And I think that's one of the things that's so great about the project in general. And I want to know about your future ideas for this initiative. Is there anything you're looking to do to expand, to grow in the future, aside from your additional, 4 or 5 a year that you're looking to build? Is there anything like you're like, yes, I really want to do this or go this direction with the project at some point in time?
I mean, there's a lot of things I want to do with it. I want to find some ways to maybe connect it to some extracurricular activities, which is something we don't have in my district because
Okay.
of the unique way that we're structured, which I won't get into the weeds about that, but we don't have extracurricular. So finding ways to connect Makerspace to give them those opportunities to have that typical, I'm thinking more of our middle school, high school students have that typical experience that their general ed peers get, but we don't have the opportunities to provide for them. So this year we're hoping, fingers crossed, to get a Lego League team going. So connecting some of our Lego
Oh,
projects and kind of using as sort of some makerspace time to actually do these competitions and maybe compete against other schools, which would be so cool. And then just getting as many people to, getting these accessible kits out to as many people as possible through as many different ways as possible. Because I just think, and yeah, I'm going to keep creating them. So I just want to keep sharing them with others because I don't want to gatekeep. I want to share everything.
and that was clear because I saw you drop the link in the ISTE presentation this year where you're like, here's everything I built. And I'm like, that's so amazing because most people are like, I built this and it's locked down. It was nice to be able to go through your kits and see like, oh, this is something when I was in the classroom I could have brought in with my students. And all those materials and those differentiated levels are there already for me
Yep.
without having to
And
do it myself.
I just want it to be there for people because, and I get ideas from others. So if you have an idea for a kit, shoot me an email. That would be so much fun to like work with other people on creating these fun ideas because, I don't have all the ideas. I always think that more heads are better. So
It's always good to
yeah,
get some different perspectives in there.
absolutely. And something, different conversations of what's going to spark an idea.
Exactly. And I want to thank you so much for sharing all about your inclusive makerspace with us today because I think for our educator listeners, and I know there's a lot of educator listeners out there, it was great to hear about like what's in your kits, your process, how you're implementing it in your different buildings. I know I just left a position where I was in charge of 15 buildings, so hearing how you managed it was great, and I hope that our listeners take something away that they can start to use if they want to bring this type of work into their districts as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always happy to connect with people, share ideas. Shoot me an email, grab the link. I'm assuming you'll put the link in your
I will be. I was gonna
in
say,
your show notes, yes.
yes.
So send me an email and grab the link to those Makerspace kits. Grab one and try them out. I always love hearing about how you're using them and what kind of creative spin you take on it to meet your students' needs. So share back and we can, collaborate on that as well. I'm always a fan of collaborating.
Awesome. I will drop both of those in the show notes. So everybody listening, it is either in the episode description if you're listening on your phone, desktop, wherever. And if you are a transcript reader instead, they will be at the bottom of the transcript as well. So they're in both places. But thank you so much, Emily, for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. This was a super fun conversation, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Assembling Inclusion podcast. I hope the information in this episode taught you something new, gave you a new idea, or showcased a new perspective. If you liked the episode, feel free to leave us a review or comment. If you have a recommendation for an individual or an organization who would make a great guest, you can message us or send us an email at assemblinginclusion@gmail.com. See you next time.